Talk to us about how you raise money today for a product like this. I think a lot of people who want to build an MVP think, they have to either put their own cash in, they don't know what type of capital to go raise. It can be a large struggle. So if you can speak to this in the sense that there's a young entrepreneur out there that wants to start something similar in the hardware tech space, how would they go about it?
Yeah. Well, my caution here is if you've seen one company get to an MVP, you've seen one company get to an MVP because it's just different with so many different types of product. I spent a lot of 2022 trying to validate, could this be done and what would it take to get it done? So one of the big items for me in 22 was understand the path to get to that prototype. What sort of costs would I be looking at? What sort of vendors would I be looking at? And so condensing a lot of that, I got some very incorrect advice, which was we could go get off the shelf devices from China that we could just bang out a prototype real quick in, 60 days. I say it's incorrect advice because if you want to build a secure product, you don't want to buy electronics from China. And if you want to build something that has the capabilities for, very unique things, which is what we've done, you do have to do some level of custom design. I also got some really good advice, which was don't think that you are the most special snowflake in the world and that everything has to be custom. Try to do as much standard and off the shelf with an ODM as possible. And so kind of those two paths converged. And I had a pretty clear path of what it would take working with Charlie to be able to get to a prototype. So in short, we knew it would be somewhere around $1 million to $2 million to get to the phase where we could say, we have a prototype, we have manufacturers, we have validated what we need to do, and we have the path to go launch the product and raise a seed round. So with that, we had a pretty good sense of what we needed from a cash perspective and kind of beat up that budget and assumptions with some advisors. And our first check was written by Trust Ventures, a third fund venture capital firm out of Austin. And the reason that they invested was, first and foremost, I'd known them for many years. I had a very deep relationship with them. One of the partners there was an early investor in Mizzen and Main, so we saw how I built the brand and the company. But their thesis was, and a big part of what Harbor will be long-term, is expansion into remote patient monitoring, remote care. And they invest in highly regulated industries and knew that if we're really successful, that eventually regulation will hinder our ability to expand access to care and lower costs. And that's a big part of their thesis. So that was the first check. And we followed it up with some angels, some family offices, some friends and family to kind of join. And unfortunately, the advice I have there is do a really good job building a really good network and prove that you can execute on what you say you can execute. So a lot of the early investors from Mizzen and Main ended up backing Harbor. And that was a big part of how we were able to get started in what ultimately was the start of a VC winter. So just, very briefly on that, in early 22, VC was ripping and everyone that I talked to was like, with your background, you'll be able to raise $5 million on the PowerPoint. Like, no problem. And then Charlie and I met, we got our act together in the summer of 22. And by the time we hit the fundraising market, it had evaporated. So it really was those pre-existing relationships that I had that enabled us to get started. And so I'll turn it over to Charlie on kind of vendor selection and kind of some of the fortunate turns along the way.
Well, because I'm kind of like a third party on the fundraising perspective. So I from an outside viewpoint, I'd like to provide a little bit more color around that. So it was not the start of the VC winter. I think that was in full force at that point. So that was like the summer of 22. People were already saying VC's dead. And I think one thing unique about Kevin is he establishes this network and he never calls on them. So he'll have this huge network and he never asks for a favor. And so when he does, it's impactful. And that could be like 5 years into a relationship. So that's just one thing, like one tip there that I would say from a third party view, watching him work is establish that network, curate it. And that's something I struggle with. And don't call in favors until you absolutely need to. But I heard a fundraising story recently. I was at a kid's birthday party and it was somebody talking about in late 2021, the fundraising cycle they went through. And I was just like, oh my God, this is the most absurd story I've ever heard. I mean, it was like a deal brief memo, right? No PowerPoint, complete, just an idea, no business model. And they were like, how big of a check do you want? And for what valuation? You name the price, right, to the founder. that was the conversation from big time VCs. It's like, imagine Kevin, whose previous business is doing 60 mil in revenue a year now. And with my background in IoT and connected devices, like trying to raise in late 2021, it would have been just a completely different story. Price setters as opposed to kind of what it was, which is a more rational investment cycle. But we started up in September. That was the fundraising cycle. In November, I pulled in my top engineer from my previous organization. So I pulled in my top two guys. So just got the band back together. And so from a product engineering standpoint, actually, I guess kind of similar story. It's like I had a network. I didn't call in favors. They said, "Hey, your next venture, I want a part of whatever you're doing." And so I said, "All right, guys, this is it. You said you wanted it in. This is it." And luckily, my lead engineer now, who was employee number one, was having a child at the exact same time, his first child. And so it was like perfect alignment. So we had a proof of concept going by December of that year, right? Because you just pull in folks that you know are going to be very high velocity on a product and engineering perspective. And by March, I think it was maybe late February, we were demoing the proof of concept in front of Trust Venture in Austin. And Brian, our lead investor, was poking holes. I mean, he was trying to break the system, and it was working. So I can actually show the prototype devices if you're interested later on, Sam. But it was very prototypey, but it worked.